Well, it was weird. It was back and forth. And it was exactly how I thought the Steelers and Colts game would be. The Steelers edging out Indianapolis for a extremely close, but a victory nonetheless. The GOAT himself misses what could have been a game winner, and the Steelers run out of Heinz Field with their biggest win of the year. It is their biggest win of the year, especially when you look at the victories of the past. Miami, Cincinnati, awful teams. Even the Chargers that have been a roller coaster ride. But even after the Steelers' biggest win of the year, even after a must-win game in which they do get the win, the reality is the Steelers still were more lucky than they were good. I'm Mike Asti, and this is another edition of Mike Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and SteelersNow.com. This is a post-game edition here, once again coming at you from outside the press box here at Heinz Field. And yes, the Steelers got a win. They had to get this game. This was a must-win game, and the Steelers got the win. They had their backs against the wall even coming in. Yes, the Colts were without T.Y. Hilton, their best weapon, and we know Brissett's been their backup quarterback through the years with Andrew Luck as a starter when he's been healthy, and he had to come in and be the starter this year after Luck's, what was a surprise to many, I don't know if to them, retirement. But the Steelers also, of course, dealing with Mason Rudolph as the starter. They've actually used Devlin Hodges, so they've had 3 quarterback start games so far this year. No Steeler fan is going to provide sympathy or make anybody, feel sorry for them based on dealing with a backup quarterback who's now your starter. So that was relatively even. But James Conner sitting out the game, missing several weeks. Steelers banged up as ever, the same as the Colts, so you can't go to the injuries. But if you look at this game, the Colts were able to move up and down the field in that first half. The Colts, even when Brian Hoyer came in at quarterback after Jacoby Brissett got hurt, so they had the Devlin Hodges situation, they had their third-string quarterback in, even though Brian Hoyer, a much more of a veteran quarterback. Joe Hayden talked about after the game, knew him from the Cleveland days. He can get the job done, and he played adequately throughout the rest of the game, but still made some mistakes. And the Colts able to still move up and down the field regardless of who is the starter, with plays that ended up being squandered by just mistakes. Hoyer throwing that interception, that probably wouldn't have happened with Jacoby Brissett, who's been much more careful with the football. In addition, the Steelers failed to get a touchdown in that entire first half, yet were right in that game. Why were they right in that game? Why were many thinking they were still going to end up winning that game? Minkah Fitzpatrick, the turnover machine, the Steelers generating another turnover, something they've been doing a lot this year despite not getting as many wins as you would like. Unlike past seasons, especially since bringing over Minkah Fitzpatrick for that trade, the Steelers are able to generate turnovers. And these turnovers now, in weeks of this week, last week, in more recent weeks, they're seeing these turnovers result in points off these turnovers. 1 or 2 more of these wins could maybe change the course of this entire season. And you look back to the Niners game, 5 turnovers, 4 in the first half, only 6 points. There's the 6. Only 6 points off of those turnovers, even with all 6 of those coming in the first half on those first 4 turnovers. You switch any of those to touchdowns, and the Steelers probably win that game with how that game went. So the Steelers able to not only get turnovers in this game, but generate points off turnovers. And despite Brian Hoyer playing well for a backup and for a journeyman, the errant pass, which ended up being picked off to Minkah Fitzpatrick, probably wouldn't got picked off to Brissett. So they benefited off of the quarterback for the opponent getting hurt, having a guy come in, not be as careful, throw the pick, and Minkah running it back. The defense was producing more offensively for the Steelers than even the offense was from the first half on, even early into the second half. Juju only 3 catches for 16-some yards. He talked after the game that he's just trying to do whatever he can to help the team win. Mason Rudolph brought up that he's still opening up the space and guys are still having to double cover him. So even if he's not catching passes, he's doing a lot for the team. He said he doesn't care about his stats. They said and did all the right things after the game. But this Steelers team is not going to win in the long term unless Juju eventually emerges as that number 1. He had those great years, those first 2 years in the league, 900-plus receiving yards, then over 1,000 last year, even better numbers than AB. But it's greatly dipped this season. The reason why is exactly what I thought could have been a problem coming into the year without Antonio Brown. They hadn't figured out who was going to be that number 2. That was an issue. That created a situation where Juju was dealing with tons of the double coverage and nobody able to open things up on the other side of the field. Something that he benefited in benefited with for so many years with those 2 years, with AB generating the double coverage and Juju being able to benefit the fruits of that labor from AB. So now that's an issue right now for the Steelers offense, is finding that other guy. The Steelers have mixed in Johnson against Miami, thought it was going to be him there. Still not really able to get that moving in this game. James Washington, he's catching some big plays, but not really emerging as that guy. And, of course, Dante Moncrief, despite all the fans thinking that was going to be him and his supposed Pro Bowl season we were supposed to be waiting for, off the roster, that's definitely not going to be him. So there's still reason to be concerned based on Juju having another game that's a little bit off kilter and yet to really see a number 2 emerge week after week after week, which is a big spot. James Conner being out, okay, where's the running game? Jalen Samuels not able to really get the running game going. Sure, he was a pass catcher. Sure, he opened up things through the air. Sure, he was Mason Rudolph's check down. And Mason Rudolph in that first half, much like the first half against Miami, was still holding on to the ball too long, waiting too long to make those decisions. But at least this week, quicker than last, he finally went to those check downs early. He finally relied on Jalen Samuels. So that's a good part of the game. That's a good positive for Rudolph. He did look better. But regardless of him looking better, the Steelers' lack of health was a major factor in this game. No one's going to cry them a river. The Colts are without T.Y. Hilton as well. They missed their big guy and were able to still sometimes generate moving down the field, and they did lose, but they had some offense going, even with the backup coming into the game and who they thought wouldn't even be part of the team, but if anything, a third-string quarterback, if luck, was there coming into the year. So they're not going to feel sorry for Steelers fans, but still a major deal. And especially a major deal moving forward with Conner missing several weeks, because Jalen Samuels opened things up through the air a little bit, but Jalen Samuels did not open up things on the ground at all. Nothing really doing on the ground. And then you can go to the referees. You can go to the calls. And I'm not going to sit here and argue for Colts fans or even Colts media members, as I heard some verbiage and some yelling from some Colts media members in the press box about how the Colts are getting screwed out of the game and there's some conspiracy and they're trying to intentionally give it to Pittsburgh to keep them in contention. Obviously, I wouldn't believe that, whether it's for or against the Colts, for or against the Steelers. The referees aren't conspiring to do anything. I'm not going to be with any of those conspiracy theories. But fact of it is, the Colts did lose a few calls that were questionable. Several of those calls did impact this game, and the Steelers were able to benefit from that. And you look back to the show, one of the shows I did last week, a show that's on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and while you're there, click on the subscribe button below this video, click on the subscribe button, make it easier for us to get the content to you. But you can find it on Pittsburgh Sports Live, you can find it on Steelers Now, you can find it on the Facebooks, you can find it on the Twitters, you can find it everywhere, especially here on this channel, that pass interference and the pass interference reviews are helping to kill the National Football League. At least in terms of the product, at least in terms of the watchability. Go back there and watch it, because I could have done the same show. I could do the same show this week. This show could be about that again if I didn't just do it. Once again, and it was late in the fourth quarter, back to back to back, as I'm updating the game feed in terms of major highlights that we put up. Pass interference review, pass interference review, win, lose, pass interference review on the challenge. Once again, running rampant into the game. But the Steelers able to benefit on a few of those calls. So if you look at it this way, okay, the Steelers get a win. Hard to be too upset, I guess, if you're a Steeler fan. They got a win and they had to get the win. But if you're going to drink, not glass half full, not glass half empty, a glass of reality, the Steelers' injuries are going to be impossible to overcome. The Steelers are now, oddly enough, this was 2 years ago where the Steelers' defense cost them a playoff game against Jacksonville. I was sitting around here, we're all shocked. Blake Bortles marching up and down the field. As much as there was criticism of Todd Haley in the offense at times with all the stars and underachieving, they were scoring points. The defense couldn't generate turnovers. The defense was bending and breaking. They couldn't get any stops in big games and critical moments. Well, throughout most of this year, and especially in recent weeks now, the defense is generating turnovers. The defense is still letting them move up and down the field, but they're bending a little and not fully breaking. They're getting stops when they have to now. This defense, with the addition of Minka Fitzpatrick, with several other players stepping up, Bud Dupree having a solid game, he finally stepping up. So that being interesting for the Steelers. Of course, TJ Watt getting it done all year. Devin Bush all over the place. Not as loud in this game. against the Colts, but Loud most of the year is looking like a case for Defensive Rookie of the Year, finally getting it going after a quiet first 2 weeks, tackling left and right all over the field, finding where the ball is. The Steelers finally have those ball hawks that Joe Hayden used to be and that he loves, and he mentioned after the game, Minkah Fitzpatrick in particular. Minkah Fitzpatrick is generating turnover after turnover every single week. Minkah Fitzpatrick is a guy that, and I said this at the time, that all of you who were criticizing Minkah Fitzpatrick coming to the Steelers in the midst of a struggling season after the Ben injury, it seemed weird timing they would make a win-now move when you lose your Hall of Fame quarterback. Well, they did it not just for now, but for the future, and it's paying dividends now to keep this team alive, and it's showing what it can do for the future. He is still very, very young. He is not getting paid all that much money. He's not hurting you against the cap all that much, and this is what I'm talking about moving forward. And really, in particular, and I tweeted this during the game coverage, there was nobody you could draft next year in the first round that would help your secondary, which was a need spot that you had to get help from, and have an immediate impact like Minkah Fitzpatrick. Right up there in turnovers, generating points off turnovers, deflecting passes, getting in the mix all the time. His name is always called if you listen to a game broadcast, and making the quarterback worried, causing the quarterback strife, and causing him pain and anxiety, needing to figure out where Minkah is on the field. Giving you more than even he gave Miami, and giving you that Alabama type of stuff for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So the Steelers' defense carries the day. The Steelers' defense, a few calls from the referees, they add to a mix that the Steelers were kind of lucky. They were fortunate. No offensive touchdowns in that first half. Yes, Mason looked good at times and did what he had to do, but only a couple big plays really in there, not much on the ground. Who would ever think a Steelers team would win a big game with pretty much nothing doing through the running game? Nothing there. So a struggling day on the running game, a day where they're relying on field goals instead of touchdowns. Chris Boswell, underrated story this year, having to come up big and be one of their MVPs. He's been consistent this season after we all know what happened last year and the roller coaster ride that helped to lead to them missing the playoffs. But Boswell has been money, and this Steelers team, Mason Rudolph leading the Steelers team, he mentioned it after the game, and he's right. The Steelers are settling for way too many field goals. The Steelers having nothing going on the ground without James Conner, who misses this week, and it's horrendous to miss, especially the weeks moving forward. All big games, but coming off of maybe the biggest game of his NFL career against Miami, 140 plus yards. That was maybe almost 6 yards a carry, I believe. That was maybe his best game as a running back for the Steelers. Gets hurt, toting the rock way too often in that game towards the end. Gets hurt there. The Steelers running game then falters here today against the Colts. And the Steelers were luckier than they were good. This is a Steelers team that needed this win, that got this win. It was a desperate Steelers team that had to get the win. They finally got some luck in their direction after not getting much luck the first few weeks of the season, but they relied on the defense to create turnovers. They relied on points off of turnovers. They got nothing going on the ground. They relied on an injury to the opposing quarterback in the game, and I know no one will feel bad because it happened to Pittsburgh, but still, that Baltimore was lucky in that victory because they had Devlin Hodges coming in at the end of a game. Played okay, but that's adding some luck to it. And yes, teams need luck throughout an NFL season. Yes, luck is a part of even every championship season, but the dose of reality is the Steelers were more lucky than they were good. Regardless, though, a big win, a must-win over the Colts and Pittsburgh. Now, they stay alive. They stay in contention. It'll, of course, matter what happens elsewhere and what the Ravens do, but the Ravens are a team that you maybe can secure and say, okay, they're going to be division champion, depending on what happens in that later matchup between the two. But plenty of space in the AFC for the Steelers in terms of a relatively weak conference. Nobody really a giant, nobody truly elite besides the New England Patriots. Ravens have their weaknesses. The Chiefs have been exposed. So you're looking at the Patriots being the elite team, but even having their issues as defending Super Bowl champions, not as strong, not as deep as, say, a year ago. Winning mostly thanks to their defense as well, which people are sometimes missing. But the Steelers, they get the win, but the Steelers, let's be real on this. The Pittsburgh Steelers were more lucky than they were good. But sometimes you need luck as well as being good, and it will pose a big question. Will be a big question mark, be a question mark with an exclamation point, and a big reason for concern. A team that is not that healthy. The Steelers, here's what they need to do. Steelers need to get the running game moving. They need to keep on generating turnovers from the defense. And Mason Rudolph needs to make his decisions quicker and be better with the football. Okay? Be more careful with the football, as you even see fumbles from him, turnover from him. The Colts not capitalizing as much as the Steelers. And again, the Steelers benefiting off some luck, more than really they benefited off being good. But regardless, a win is a win in the NFL, and being lucky, it's part of it.